Riding through the night together and talking a blue streak, we recalled how it had been me, not Mom, who had found him in the first place, back in San Francisco in the early 90s. I was 8 at the time, walking a dog that was not our dog, and he was sitting on the lawn in the panhandle, and my dog went up to him, sniffing his pant cuffs, pulling me after him. "What are you reading?" I remember asking him. I felt safe having Bender with me, even though I was not supposed to talk to strangers. He did not really look like a stranger anyway, just like one of the hippies from Haight Street, long hair, lanky, bell-bottoms. He turns the book over so I could see the title. I could tell he was trying to see whether I could read yet. The second most important thing for grown-ups to find out, the most important question being, boy or girl? "What's your book about?" I asked. "Just stuff. Funny stuff," he said, and he sounded like no one I knew, not even Mila, the dog's owner, who was from Czechoslovakia and who was letting us stay in his house. "Are you from Czechoslovakia?" I asked nonetheless, and he laughed, looking surprised. Then he said no, he was from Germany. He admitted, though, that it was right next to Czechoslovakia. Then he asked me why I knew the name of that country, and I told him about the dog, too, the Czech commands he had been trained to mind, his canine friendships, his enmities, the squirrels he liked to chase, the leech he had just about chewed up. I told him Mila always set out a pail of soapy water for me to wash the dog down with before letting him back into the house, and Nick nodded to signal he understood what a burden I had shouldered. When I came home after that walk, Mom was kneeling in front of the refrigerator, trying to think of something to cook, but she whirled round like stung when I told her about the man who had talked to me in the park. She made me go back to the park with her, without the dog, and had me point Nick out to her. When I ran over to him, she called my name as if I was falling off a bluff, or her. She was worried some pervert had talked to me, I guess. She had almost the same look of panic in her eyes when I came in that night after Nick had dropped me off in front of the house and gone straight back down the coast, 3 hours in the dark with no one to shift for him. The receding taillights of his car looked almost like the alarm signals in the back of his mind, because he had seemed scared by the very idea of meeting Mom. Going up the driveway through the gravel, I heard the engine of Mum's car ticking where it stood underneath the trellis in front of the house, and I realized instantly that she must have gone over to Sonora to meet the bus. I had forgotten to call her, and she had not called me from Sonora because she does not have a cell phone. Except for the light in the kitchen, the house was entirely dark, and she must have just come in. But, seated at the kitchen table where she always sat, her hand folded neatly on the table like a person at grace, it looked as if she had been waiting there for hours. She sat there watching me in the black reflection of the window pane, and the very fact that she did not turn her head to look at me straight told me that she must have been crying, and I thought, here we go again. But her eyes were dry when she turned her head, and she was clearly happy to see me. I walked over to her quickly and took her face in my hands as you would a sad child's. "You weren't on the bus," she whispered. "I know," I whispered back, "but look, I'm here now. Everything's fine." "You didn't hitchhike, did you?" "No, why? Is that the worst?" I pulled away from her so I could look into her face to see if she was ready to quit moping. She smiled briefly, then bit her lip and looked away from me, got up. She went over to the stove, lit a match and put on the kettle, and I could barely hear her when she told the kettle that, yes, it was the worst. Mum? Would you like a sleepy time? Okay, sure. Mum, what's wrong? Oh, I just don't want you to hitchhike is all. Silly old Mum. She showed me 2 mugs, and I was supposed to pick one. I knew that she liked the one without handle, and with the chipped rim and the starfish and lobster on it, so I pointed at the other one. You won't believe who I met, who I rode back with. I don't care who you rode with, Nina, she said, and not looking brought her mug down so hard on the edge of the sink that it broke. Some of the scalding tea went over her sweater, and I ran over to help her take it off. But she just looked nonplussed at the mess and stepped back from me and said, as if nothing at all had happened, she did not want me to hitchhike. People did not hitchhike anymore. It was a thing that died in the 60s and on, until I screamed and we quarrelled. She never did take that sweater off. In the end, I did not even tell her whom I had met and who had given me a ride without coming in to say hi to her. And after a while, I was glad I had not. What good could it have done her? How could she possibly have been as happy to see him as I was, after he had left her, or she him? Upstairs, in my old bed, lying awake despite the hour, I tried to think of a good way to make the 2 meet, how to prepare a moment where they would meet on new terms without their vicious memories. Like the faces one sometimes encounters in dreams, familiar faces, but in unexpected roles and lives. She may have been in the room for some time before I heard her. She would do things like that. I did not sense her presence until she was practically by the bed, blocking my view, and I did not say anything, just pulled back the covers and scooted over. It must have been one of those nights again where she would not be alone but come to me and stay with me like a child whose own bed is besieged by monsters. I wondered what she would do once I left for the summer, leaving her stranded at night, solitary shipwreck on a dark tide. She lay so still that I knew she had to be awake. You could tell by her soundless breathing. Maybe she was afraid we were still mad at each other, when I had not been mad at her at all. Go to sleep, I told the back of her head, and put my arm around her. No one hitchhiked, you hear? And they won't ever. I'm going to get my own car. She smelled like Mum. Mammal-like and a bit like pond when you swim across it and your nose is almost level with the surface. Whenever she broke a sweat, she would smell like the first drops of rain on tarmac, and when she cried, her face smelled like the ocean if you got close enough, as if the tears had washed over her in a briny crest. Water smells, all of these. Lying there next to me, she just smelled like mammal and pond though, no salt water, and after a while she started breathing quietly, feeling hot to the touch the way she used to in her sleep. She had not said word one. I found Nick, I whispered, but there was no reaction, and after a while I was sure she had fallen asleep, while I myself was wide awake. She is just 38, I thought, lying there next to her, and Nick 6 years younger. I thought about the fact that I was about to leave her. although I had never thought about my life after high school in these terms. But there it was. To her it would, or did already, seem as if I was deserting her. Then I thought about the times she had left me, or tried to, as I listened to her sleep in the dark bed of hair and watched the white curtains move in the dark.